changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark with some instant inspiration from Chicken Soup for the Soul. You know, one of the things that fascinates me is the number of people who write stories for us about chucking it all and starting it over with new homes, new jobs, and eventually new happiness. I did it. I switched from the world of finance and technology stocks to the world of publishing inspirational books. And that led to one of our books, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Reboot Your Life. I'm going to share two stories from that book today. In the first one, Christy Paxton talks about how she and her husband were spending most evenings just lying on the couch watching television. Their kids had grown up and moved away, and Christy and her husband just didn't have as much to do as they used to. She imagined them just disappearing and their headstone reading, "Here lie the Paxtons, bored to death in the 21st century." So they talked about fixing their dull life. They considered driving Route 66, backpacking the wilderness, navigating coastal waters, but nothing changed. And then, within a couple of months, life changed for them. Christy's father-in-law passed away. Their beloved fox terrier died of some mysterious ailment. Their daughter had a friend who died. And several of their peers were diagnosed with cancer. And they turned 60. So Christy and her husband decided to revisit an old dream of theirs and buy a boat. They would go from kayaks to a boat between 36 and 42 feet, which would make it large enough for long trips and for living on. And in case that wasn't enough of a challenge, they also got a puppy, and that puppy would need to be trained to do his business on a boat. They had definitely reinvigorated their lives. They flew from Iowa to Florida to start searching for a boat to buy, and they began figuring out their finances too, analyzing whether they could move onto a boat for 6 to 12 months. Finally, after some false starts with boats that didn't pass closer inspection, they found the right boat and they were ready to go. And Christy writes, "Today, from the windows of our floating home, we have new perspective in a watery world. Our brains exercise as we explore new plumbing, new knots, and new docking maneuvers. We conquer cooking challenges in a tiny galley. Our boating community regales us with stories collected from smooth and stormy voyages. We soak it all up as we form new friendships over glasses of wine. And that new puppy, he took to it like a born sailor too." Talk about chucking it all. Camia Taylor did it whole hog, as she explains in her story called From Corporate to Carrots. Camia says she was 50 and she was stuck in a job she didn't like, working for an international corporation that provided real estate advice to non-American investors. The corporate culture was paternalistic and downright offensive to women working there. Camia had a job with a big title, but that didn't change how she was treated. After 9/11, when the real estate market softened, Camia started looking for another job just in case. But there was nothing available for her to switch to. And then, what she had anticipated happened, and she lost her job. Her company was shutting down. Even though Camia hadn't loved that job, she still needed it. She was a single mother of a preteen daughter, and she hadn't put any money aside for a rainy day. When the job finally ended, Camia got severance, so she was going to be okay for 6 months. But then what? She realized she could keep trying to find a replacement job and possibly run out of money within 6 months, or she could do something different, maybe even work for herself so she could control her destiny. One thing she knew for sure was that staying in high-cost Los Angeles didn't make sense for her. So she ended up choosing a new location based on what she could afford. It was 1,800 miles away in southwest Missouri, and it was a land full of open range, woods, and wild animals, and far away from any cities. So she and her daughter sold most of their possessions, and Camia says that everyone thought they were crazy, but they did it. They moved to Missouri, and they got a great deal on a rundown 9-acre farm that was in foreclosure. And then Camia started her new business, growing organic vegetables. Now that a number of years have passed, she's growing vegetables, and she has also planted fruit and nut trees that should produce shortly. She rescues dogs, too, and there's plenty of room for them to run around. She says, despite an occasional bout of loneliness, since neighbors are few and far between, I wouldn't trade this lifestyle for anything. I don't have the income or the stuff I once did, but the peace of mind, true friends, and freedom are priceless. There's a great quote from Reverend Howard Thurman that sums this up beautifully, and here it is. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So that's it. 2 stories about rebooting your life, which is actually a pretty exciting thing to contemplate. If you want to read some tips about how to do this from Chicken Soup for the Soul, Reboot Your Life, go to our website, chickensoup.com, and click on the podcasts button. You'll see all the books that are featured on this week's podcast, and you can click on the Reboot Your Life book cover and read some great ideas for getting you motivated to make whatever changes you think you might want to make in your own life. And come back next time for a couple of stories that will change how you interact with people. They're both great lessons in not jumping to negative conclusions.